Off-season has started, and well, there's going to be some dominoes falling. JNT and I will predict who are the next dominoes, who are the most valuable free agents still remaining. Worlds still happening. NRG, maybe not the results that we wanted, but we'll get to that. T1, the final hope of the LCK, we'll get into can T1, excuse me, sweep the LPL because that's what they must do, and a bunch of just a bunch of more free agency stuff to get into. Episode 144 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT 250. Jinter, we've got our first dominoes falling, and of course there will be more. Let's start with Cloud9. Are they building a super team? Is it already a super team, or do you need like another piece for it to be considered a super team?
I mean, I feel like you've already got to call it a super team at this point. You have the best jungler in the league, you have the best mid laner in the league, and you have the best AD carry in the league, all on the same team. And while a lot of people are pointing towards Fudge and Vulcan, saying, "Well, these guys have kind of been underperforming as of late," and I guess I should lead off by saying Fudge has not yet been confirmed or even rumored to be confirmed for this roster. So I think for the purpose of this episode, I think we're talking about Cloud9 with Fudge as the top laner. So just
Hmm.
before, I mean, I don't know. Do you not want to make that assumption or
I don't want to make that assumption yet.
okay? That's fair.
It's like I'm not saying it's not possible. It's obviously possible, but I don't know why they wouldn't have announced that. I guess is what I'm saying. Like if he was the top laner, wouldn't he have been announced already?
Well, and the important thing to note is C9 have a free import slot, even with the four players that we do know who are rumored to be on the team, which is Blabber, Berserker, Jojopyun, and Vulcan. That's only one import slot. So while
Yeah.
Fudge is a likely candidate for that last spot, and over the course of his career in the LCS probably does warrant a spot on the team, I think you could also make the case that C9 could be looking elsewhere for top lane because Fudge did not have the greatest end to 2023, and maybe there's better options out there.
What might get really interesting here is if Cloud9 does go for an import top laner, mostly because the the story that we're being told around the LCS is esports winter, and yes, we're well into that. However, if we're still going for other imports, right, before North American top laners, it doesn't speak to me like that story has completely shifted yet. You get what I'm trying to say? Like it seems like some teams, maybe it's just Cloud9, maybe TL, I don't know, but it seems like some teams are not um saving money to avoid imports. They're just taking the North American talent at the cheaper price. It doesn't seem like that's for sure a thing yet with every single team in the LCS, even though that's what we've been told.
Yeah, I think obviously when you hear stuff about salaries decreasing and there being less imports in the league, you presume that those are going to be the teams who are towards the bottom of the standings and who have traditionally been towards the bottom of the standings. Your Immortals, your Dignitas, your Evil Geniuses potentially. Feel like that's going to sort of the statements that have been made about the financial concern around the league. I think is going to be much more apparent towards the bottom of the league than it will be the top of the league. One thing that I did find interesting that seemed to be a pretty big discussion point on Reddit and Twitter is with obviously the salaries decreasing, it's likely that there aren't going to be as many super teams, maybe including Cloud9 in this case, and that the top end players are going to be distributed across a wider variety of teams. And I think for the most part, that should create, a much more balanced league where we don't necessarily always see this distinct top half and bottom half. Sometimes it's five, sometimes it's four, sometimes it's six teams. But you can very clearly see throughout the history of the LCS, there's always been, you know, an upper tier and a lower tier. Like there's no middle class. Like there's no middle, even in the LCS
Okay.
these days.
I want to ask you, as the Cloud9 fan, are you hoping that it's Fudge? Because if I remember right, you said that you would replace Fudge, right?
Yeah, I would.
So
I,
who are you hoping for if not Fudge, I guess? Is there anyone that comes to mind when you think like, "Oh, this guy's available," or something like that?
I mean, I think any of the generic, NA top laners you could probably fit in there. Your Someday, your Impact, your Licorice, maybe like I'm trying to think of an average or so top laner that you could run on the roster that would be good. I mean, I'm not
And
exactly
would you
sure.
say all of those are upgrades? All the names that you just said, would you put all of those as upgrades over Fudge?
No, it's a really hard question to say. I mean, I think the discussion that we're having right now is slightly different from the one that we had last week because last week we put the GM hat on, and presumably with
Mhm.
Fudge you have to give him a new contract. Presumably, like I said, and like I said, the climate of the league is obviously going to make that a very interesting point. But if it's I sign Fudge to a 1 year deal, or the only other option is I have to sign Fudge to a multi-year deal, which would be more than I could be spending on another player that could be just as good, if not better, I would go with the latter.
It feels like the Cloud9 thing to do here would be to replace Fudge just because they have a history of every time their top laner even just shows a little bit sign of weakness, they'll go for somebody else. Just in the past, that's been like a challenger player or a academy or whatever the hell we're calling it nowadays. Yeah, still challenger, right? Calling it challenger.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And I don't know if they have that piece, right? Because they gave up their whole academy squad or whatever the hell. So it's like it seems like if they go with a different piece this time, it's not going to be someone for your from your challenger team because they let that go, right?
well, I think kind of getting back to the original question, is C9 building a super team? And if the answer is yes, it makes it very interesting because that's very anti Cloud9 in terms of the way that they have built their team pretty much
Yes,
over the
agreed.
course of the entire history of the LCS. Like this is very un like this is very new for a team like Cloud9 to be one locking in their roster so early. They're actually one of the few top end teams in the LCS that doesn't normally go after the big money free agents and lock their roster early on. C9 normally kind of works the B to B plus, free agents. They very rarely bring in the big names. And I think this is probably the first example of Cloud9 saying, we're kind of going all in here. And I feel like that's kind of what they're doing. Like I said, you have the best player in the jungle, you have the best player in the mid lane, and you have the best player in the ADC in the entire league. And you could also make arguments for Fudge and Vulcan being at the top end of their role. Yes, maybe not performance wise in the last 6 months, but over the course of their LCS careers, these guys have been top players in their role the entire time. And if you're expecting the quality of this roster to elevate those players who may have been having lesser performances on other teams, i.e., Vulcan and Jojopyun, you look at the ceiling of the roster and you can't deny that this can be the best team in the league quite easily.
Yeah, and the Jojopyun signing to me, I guess maybe the Vulcan one as well, but mostly the Jojopyun signing to me is Cloud9 losing patience with looking for that piece. Mid lane, let's talk about their mid laners that they've had over the last couple of years. Last year, Jensen filled in and it was okay, but like Jensen was not what we have seen out of Jensen in the past. Clearly, Cloud9 thought they could do better. This year, they had Diplex and M&S. Neither one of them clearly filled that spot the way Cloud9 wanted. Niski, or excuse me, when they got rid of Niski and they went with Perks, Perks was a solid LCS mid laner, even probably a better than solid, but not like Perks level mid laner either. So it feels like it's been some time since Cloud9
You
has
forgot
had that.
one.
Who did I forget?
Fudge mid lane.
Yeah, Fudge.
I
Yeah,
always forget it myself, so that's why I feel like I need to bring it up because it's funny.
yeah. Um, that was only for the 4 games with LS though, right?
Oh, that was a whole split.
Or did he I didn't remember if he stayed there. Oh, you're right, because Summit stayed top. That's right. All this saying though is that finally Cloud9 has that clear. Well, I mean, he just won the MVP, right? That clear number one mid laner. Um, so I feel like that's them losing a little bit of patience, but also maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's that they just don't have the options again because everyone got rid of their fucking challenger teams.
Well, I mean, it's not even. I think it's not even about like they've ran out of patience. I think they sort of view it as the perfect time and opportunity to do this type of thing. And I think it's because
Mhm.
they have players of the likes of Berserker and Blabber. They feel that this is the right time to maybe swing a little bit bigger than what they have done in the past. And, presumably, if I remember correctly, Jojopyun is actually under contract for next year. So presumably they had to buy him out. It's not that he was a
Mhm.
free agent and he went to Cloud9. It was Cloud9 bought out his contract. Now, once again, presumably that contract wasn't too large, just because Jojopyun's only been in the league a very short time and is on his first contract only. So it's not going to be maybe as they wouldn't have to fork out as much cash as they did to maybe get Vulcan the first time or perks and whatnot. But it's still a big move in comparison to the rest of the league,
Yeah.
considering that there was Jojopyun was, as we kind of said, he was the major player in the offseason of the LCS. As evidence in the Sheep Esports article that they released, there was actually, a pretty there was a bidding war kind of going on for Jojopyun. There was a couple LEC teams that are interested, but the teams that they outlined in the LCS who were very interested was Golden Guardians and FlyQuest. And
Mhm.
this is me just guessing based off of what they kind of detailed in the article and the talk that you heard from a couple of the co-streamers this past weekend. It really sounded like Jojopyun to Golden Guardians was actually the move that was most likely going to happen. but
Really? I missed that
that
part.
wasn't the case.
Interesting. Yeah, they had to like spend less or something. They figured out last second,
Yeah,
which
it
is like,
was
why are you figuring that out so last second? I don't like to hear that. That can't be good. But that was yeah, that was very interesting. Um, Obviously, this is way too early, but we're gonna ask the question anyways, or I want to ask you the question, Jinter. What are your expectations of this roster? And yeah, I know that's not a fair question. I don't care. What's a failure for this roster, Jinter?
I
As the
mean,
Cloud9 fan.
if we're being honest and fair, the expectations of this roster should be exactly the same as the expectations of the Team Liquid 2022 roster. They should be
Which is
expected to win both splits and should be expected to go to Worlds and should be expected to do something at Worlds, which
ooh.
means not be out in the fourth round of Swiss stage at the very least.
Damn, I like that you're putting the expectations high, and
Well,
maybe
and
rightfully so, by
those
the
were
way.
the
But
exact same expectations that we painted for Team Liquid, and they failed drastically at those. Yeah, they weren't like a terrible team by any means. I think they finished second in spring and third in summer. But when you end up not making Worlds and not winning a single split, pretty epic failure for that team. And I think you have to hold Cloud9 to those same standards because I'll say it again: best jungler, best mid laner, best AD carry, and those are ones
best
we know
support,
without a
maybe.
shadow of a doubt.
Best support, maybe.
Well, maybe, but who knows? It all depends on kind of how much you value the last 6 months as opposed to maybe the last 3 years. And I think that's the
Yeah,
conversation that the whole league and probably Cloud9 themselves is going to be having with Fudge in the top lane. Because there are other options that you can argue with. Maybe they don't have the as big of an upside as Fudge, but are easily going to be a much more stable and neutral player, i.e., your Sunday or your Impact, something like that.
yeah. I'm going to say at least one LCS title in Worlds. Um, Mostly because we still need to see the rest of free agency unfold. That's why I said it's not fair to ask you that question, but I just wanted to do it anyways because I think it's fun. I'm gonna go with one at this point in time. I'm gonna say one title, either spring or summer. That's assuming spring exists, by the way. We don't even know. Like there might be changes. There might be 3 splits if they do the LEC thing. That's a whole nother can of worms.
True,
But
true.
if the format's the same, I think one title and one Worlds appearance is the at the bar, and then you need to get probably more than that to be happy. Obviously, the main team that people are talking about is FlyQuest. We're gonna get to FlyQuest in just a second. Before we do, want to remind people to subscribe. We're trying to reach 500 subscribers, so go look at that subscribe button. If it's not clicked, click it, and then obviously hit a like button. Call us out in the comment section if we're saying stupid shit. I noticed
Oh, yeah.
JT, we kind of use our comment section more as like a call out section. You ever notice that? That I'm always like, hey, correct us on shit. I kind of like that about our
Yeah,
comment section.
I uh I made an oopsie out of myself, and a lot of people noticed in the comments. Thank you for that, first of all. But yes, Knight is not Korean. I know I said he
Yeah.
was Korean, but like I said in the comments, he was playing too well, and he baited me into thinking he was Korean.
I feel partially responsible because I missed that too. I knew that. I promise I knew that, but I missed it. And by the way, I'll also call you out more since we're already doing it. You've made that mistake before on this podcast, the night thing. It might have been last year. I don't know, but
He's just
regardless.
that good. Like, I don't know. He's
Anyways, light up the comment section if we're getting shit wrong. We're not offended. We read all the comments. Yeah. Okay, let's get back to FlyQuest. They obviously made a really big signing, getting inspired. How should people value inspired? Because for me, I think he's fucking amazing. But whenever there's someone that takes a split off, I think there's good, fair reason to be a little bit worried, right?
yeah, he didn't play competitively at all whatsoever in the summer split, mostly because he was still under contract with Evil Geniuses and they weren't able to move his contract to a different team. And I think there can be some concerns, obviously, for a player who doesn't play. But I think in this case, the one split layoffs, I think, is something that I'm not as concerned with as opposed to a full 1 year layoff.
Agreed.
Because, I just comparing some of the previous examples to one split breaks as opposed to 1 year breaks, specifically within the LCS, has been pretty decent. You look at Jensen, wasn't playing in spring 2022, comes back in summer 22, and plays really well with Cloud9. Doublelift didn't play in season 7 spring, played in season 7 summer, obviously was really good, went to Worlds, and I think Inspired will probably be similar case to that. You have to assume that he was still grinding pretty hardcore through his time away and running up to Worlds, as opposed to, like I said, taking a full year off, where you've heard in cases of players taking a full year off obviously can be related to injuries. You'll hear the player talk about, they took like a decent chunk of a break from league and maybe they only pick it up halfway through the year before their next year of playing. So I don't think that the time off is going to hurt Inspired, but it's obviously a really big move for FlyQuest because this team had really high aspirations in spring split. They kind of met them. They faltered in the playoffs. Moving into summer, they tried to swing even bigger and then failed ultimately. And it doesn't
Mhm.
seem like that's discouraged them. And I applaud them for doing it again.
Yeah, they want to win, clearly. So for now, it's pretty clear that Cloud9 is winning the offseason. But I rocked the FlyQuest jersey for this episode because I want to remind people not to forget about FlyQuest. They did add a really, really good piece. And mind you, they would still have to make a lot happen for them to take the winning the offseason crown away from C9, but they're not out of it yet. I think they're probably the only one that's in the race with the Inspired signing. We still don't know what to really think of Masu. I mean, a lot of people are really hyped on this guy. However, there is a spectrum of what you can get from rookie North American talent. You've got APA that we just had. He had ups and downs, and like they they were very apparent this year. You got Danny. A lot of people are comparing Masu to Danny, right? Maybe he's the next Danny. Who the hell knows? Maybe he's the next Jojopyun. That's a really big question mark, and so that obviously makes judging FlyQuest and their too early announcements very difficult to judge just how good of a team this will be.
Yeah, and I wonder actually what the top lane situation looks like because we found out pretty early on, number one, that Prince wasn't going to be on FlyQuest in 2024. We knew that
Mm-hmm.
last week. And obviously this week we got the news that Masu was going to be stepping up into the starting role. I think a move that a lot of people expected. Continuing with the bot lane, we know that Vulcan's not going to be there. He's going to be on Cloud9. And top lane is something that we haven't heard about. So I wonder if that means that FlyQuest is going to look to keep Impact for the roster going forward, which first of all, I think would be a great idea
Yep.
because he's one of the best top laners in the LCS, not in terms of both play and in terms of a team dynamic. Impact has literally been able to step into every single team that he's been a part of in his time in the LCS and done his job well and has helped lead his team to success. The worst team he was ever on LCS was NRG, or I guess maybe it was.
FlyQuest, FlyQuest of last year.
Yeah, I mean, but that's
he had a good split though in summer.
yeah.
Like we everyone protected Impact. Everyone was like, no, Impact is playing well, even though this team is trash. I get your point though. Impact makes teams better. That's the point that you're
Every
getting at,
single
and that
team he's
is
been on, the team has improved because of him.
agreed. And he is exactly where I want to go next because for me, he is the most valuable piece that is remaining. Mostly because I think FlyQuest and Cloud9 do two teams that they're front runners for winning the offseason. They both need top laners. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the guy that both of these teams are trying to go after right now. Do we know if he's still under contract with
I'm checking
FlyQuest? I
right now.
2024. So he's still got one more year left on his contract with FlyQuest. That might be advantage FlyQuest in keeping the impact piece. I
Yes.
also think Impact did play with Inspired, right, on EG. I'm not crazy.
Yep.
So that's something that's going for FlyQuest as well. But then there's also like, hey, Cloud9's looking really fucking good. You're telling me Impact wouldn't maybe want to go there? Like that's also a big possibility as well. So yeah, to me, that's the most valuable piece. There are other top laners you mentioned earlier. Someday Licorice, although I don't have any reason to believe Licorice is leaving Golden Guardians, it's certainly possible. I don't think Dokla's leaving NRG, although I don't think anyone would go for Dokla. Revenge has announced, but like, no offense, Revenge. I don't think that he's really close in that race of the other players. So, like, to me, Impact, most valuable player that is still remaining in free agency, agree or disagree?
Thought we were saving the revenge. We were trying to not hate on revenge until 2024.
Oh, did I? Is that a rule we had?
I don't
Did
know.
I
I just,
break?
I just,
I'm
I
breaking
just
the
thought,
rules.
I just thought we remembered saying something about like we should just stop the revenge flame till next year. But
Yeah,
you had to sneak one in there, give him a little cheap
I,
shot.
I don't. Okay, timeout. Back up. I said he's not as good as Impact or Someday. Doesn't belong in that conversation. I am not flaming Revenge. Although I could definitely see how it could be interpreted that way.
Well, you did
Uh,
say his name just after Dokla, whom after you just said about Dokla was like, yeah, nobody wants him anyway. And then you're like, yeah, and then there's also revenge.
Oh
So
shit, I'm guilty.
you've
Oh,
inadvertently
brother.
done it, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, who is the most valuable piece remaining? Because there's a couple that come to mind that I think you could say instead of Impact, but I want to know what you think.
Yeah, I guess if we're only going off of the players who we know are free agents at this exact moment, I think it would have to be Impact slash Someday. I feel like Someday is starting to turn into the Impact type of player. I think initially, towards the beginning of his LCS career, he wasn't like an Impact. He was more of a carry player who more played for himself. But I think basically since season 11, which was which was the year where he, kind of redefined himself, and 100 Thieves was the first seed going into Worlds that year. I think he's really become more of that Impact type player where he's very reliable in the top lane, left to his own devices, isn't necessarily going to hardcore win you the game, but is never going to lose you the game, is always very stable. But if we're going off of players who we don't necessarily know whether or not they're going to be on their current team going into next year, the name that I'm going to throw out is River. And the reason I say that is because he's another player who has just played very well on almost every single team that he's been on, and has been, kind of the lead of those respective teams when you think about their performances. And people had
2024 for River, just for reference. Everyone on Golden Guardians is 2024.
yeah, that's why I did, like I said, I had tried to make the distinction between if they're free agent or if they're still under contract. But looking at River, he kind of struggled towards the end of his Golden Guardians tenure. I know he was they were sort of viewed as a package deal, him and Gory. So I wonder if to some effect there's going to be that same dynamic if they were to switch teams. I don't know. But I think that he could be a pretty interesting player that could be on a different team and could make a big impact.
I may have heard this. Somebody can let me know if I'm making this up in the comment section. I may have heard that Gory's going back to Korea.
No, I don't know.
Maybe I read that in the Sheep article where they said they were
you
going
got some
after
sources.
Jojo.
You breaking some news here?
No. Although the Twitter meta is to just say sources and then you don't reveal your source. So okay, sources. Sources, Gory's going back to Korea. There you go. There's my source. I can't let you know my sources, J&T, because that would be unethical or something. I don't know. Yeah, feel free to let me know if I'm pulling that out of thin air. If somebody has a source on where I may have come up with that, please help me out with that. It might have been in the Sheep article. Or maybe it's just me thinking that because Jojo was on Golden Guardians' radar. Maybe that's why I think that. Right? Like Golden Guardians wouldn't have been going after Jojopyun if they were keeping Gory, right?
Yeah, I mean, presumably, yes.
Yeah, so maybe that's why I think that. I don't know. Did we mention Doublelift?
No. You see,
Doublelift's a weird one because he's normally, well, at least the first Domino, it's like Doublelift has fallen to tier 2 Domino this year.
he is a free agent he is a free agent actually, but I mean, I'm pretty sure he's expressed his interest to play on 100 Thieves again. I mean, I feel like I've heard him say this on stream multiple times during the co-streams that he's going to play again, and he's probably playing on 100 Thieves.
Oh, okay. That makes me feel a lot better. I mean, we'll have to wait for that to be actual fact before I feel fully better, but it was worrying to me that I have heard nothing about Doublelift this offseason. So I was kind of like Monka S, like what's going on with this guy?
But are you saying that from the standpoint of playing, or just what team he's going to be on? Because he has outlined.
I haven't heard anything.
He's mentioned multiple times that he's playing next year
perfect.
for sure.
Okay, good.
He said that. He said that
on co-streams.
I mean, yeah, he said that shortly after he got eliminated. I'm pretty sure. Also,
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Also, after you get eliminated, things can change after a month or two, depending on who your teammates are going to be. Like there was discussion last year that maybe the only reasons Bjergsen and Doublelift were coming back was because they could play together, right? Like we didn't really know. We didn't get all of those details, so that's also possible. Something someone brought up in the chat. What did they say? Oh, right. Cadril brought up Wonder to Cloud9. I don't know if he was memeing, but I did see that video, and I did think that was interesting. What do you think about Wonder possibly going to Cloud9?
I don't know.
Would you feel better or worse than Fudge? Because remember, imports don't always pan out the way even though they're really good in Europe, like Hans Sama, for example. Sometimes you just don't, I don't know what the word is, acclimate well to your area or whatever. Like, would you be more nervous about Wonder coming over, or would you rather keep Fudge, or what do you think about that?
I don't know. I think my initial answer would be no, just because Wonder did play well when he subbed in for Fnatic towards the end of the summer split.
Plays too much World of Warcraft for you? You can admit it.
I don't know. I mean, Wonder just hasn't been the same Wonder that he was when G2 was peaking really hard. He was kind of one of the first G2 players that really started showing signs of underperformance, especially when they had that reckless type roster. Now I know Obviously, that situation was super weird and probably didn't come down to individual performances and more of a team dynamic and whatnot. But it felt like to me that Wonder was one of the I don't know. He doesn't. I don't think he's at the top of his game anymore. If
Yeah,
and
I would
maybe
agree.
that's harsh, and maybe that's just like kind of saying that purely just as guesswork. But
I don't think that's harsh, but I would say that Wonder not being at the top of his game might still be a good top laner in the LCS. That's like the counterpoint
I
there.
mean,
I
maybe
don't I
you're
haven't
definitely not
watched enough.
wrong. But if you compare what Wonder has looked like to what Fudge has looked like, I see very minimal difference.
Yeah, and I would also say that we haven't seen enough out of Wonder lately, right? He replaced Oscar Rinnan for a little bit, but like we haven't seen enough out of Wonder to have like yeah, full
Yeah.
confidence that he would step in and be a
And
monster,
I mean,
right?
he was pretty much just one tricking Renekton when he was playing. So, like, if anything, talking about the player break and how that can help and hurt a player going into the next season if they have not played the past season, if Wonder spent a much longer period of time of not playing competitively than the
Yeah.
majority of other pros who've only taken a break for one split.
It's a really big risk if you go with a guy like him. If I'm being honest, I actually think it's too big of a risk if to be blunt, because we've seen players just not be the guy that they were. Not to mention we said how he's taken so much time off, but like you could point to Bwipo, for example. Bwipo, one of the best top laners the West has ever had. He came over to North America and wasn't bad, but was not Bwipo either, right? There's plenty of examples to point to of guys that come over and just aren't themselves anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you compare what you saw out of Fudge the last 6 months to Wonder when you saw him playing continuously for the last 6 months when he was playing, and it's almost the same thing. Like
you know,
it's a side grade for the most part. More likely a downgrade and small potential upside, but Fudge still has a
speaking
better upside than Wonder right now.
Okay. Speaking of some players that have come over, there's a couple of guys that I want to throw in the conversation. Um, we haven't touched on Sven yet, right? He is a guy that has come over. He's been over for a while, but have we touched on him?
No, he's did announce that he was going to be a free agent and that he was specifically looking for ADC offers only, no support.
Yeah.
Not a surprise whatsoever, considering that's been his sentiment the entire time he's played the role. Said he's only playing support for Berserker, and now he's going to be back to playing ADC.
Not a lot of places that I could picture him going, honestly. If we think Doublelift is going to stay on 100 Thieves, if Berserker signed with Cloud9, EG, I don't think they can afford him. Not that he's gonna. I know he's probably not gonna demand, you know, a bunch of money with salaries going down. But still, I don't think EG could afford. FlyQuest going with Masu. Uh, NRG probably keeping FBI. Golden Guardians maybe keeping Sticks. There's not a lot of options left, and so I guess my question to you is there any of them that stand out as like a front runner? Maybe Team Liquid.
Yeah, the two that I thought of were Team Liquid and Shopify, probably.
Mm. Yeah, we haven't heard
Um,
jack shit from Team Liquid, by the way. Isn't that weird?
yeah, but like I said, the two that instantly jumped into my mind were Team Liquid and Shopify. Team Liquid, just because they're probably going to end up with the new ADC. Like I said, it's more likely than not that Team Liquid's probably running a completely new roster going into next year, and I should say completely new minus Core JJ. Should Core JJ still be on the team? And Sven and Core JJ, they've been playing against each other for such a long time in the LCS now. They probably have some form of mutual respect, and they probably respect each other as players. So that's why I think that could make sense. And Team Liquid probably just wants a strong veteran presence, who's a known quantity. And I think that's if I'm guessing, that's what Team Liquid's probably looking for going into 2024 is just not have as many unknowns and just want to kind of uh just not yeah, like I said, not go into the next season with so much uncertainty. Um
Yeah.
and I say Shopify just purely because Revan, who is a former C9 coach, is the head coach of TSM.
Okay. Um, Another guy that I want to throw in the mix, Niski. uh, he made a tweet. I'm looking for the tweet while I'm talking here. That's why. But he made a tweet about McDonald's or something. Now I interpreted that as I don't got a team, and it's not looking like I have a team. But honestly, I think that's a guy FlyQuest should go for. I think if Niski signed to FlyQuest, I think that that's another team that I would put just right behind Cloud9 as like favorites to win the LCS. Am I too bullish on Niski, in your opinion?
I mean, yeah, maybe. You love you some Niski, I guess.
Yeah, I think his playstyle is great, honestly.
Mhm. I
Oh,
don't know.
and one more tweet.
I think it's just more likely that he'll be in the LEC still. You know, the only reason he was in North America to begin with was to go to Cloud9 to presumably get to international competition uh, the easiest, which is what the majority of top tier EU players do when they come over to the LCS. So I would say
Did you?
no, but at the same time, it has happened before.
He's also a guy that has come over to North America and has performed. Like he's a guy that I'm not as worried about. Of like, does he fit into the LCS? Like some players just don't succeed in the LCS. He's one that clearly has. Um, did you see the tweet of him like as the McDonald's guy?
No, but what, he's going to be on Team McDonald's next year?
Well, that's what he's basically tweeting here. I could send it to you if you want to look at it, but I mean, he's serving at a drive-through, the classic uh, NA meme, which makes me think he's available. So he's a guy that I thought made a lot of sense. I think teams should go after him. And then one more. Where is it? Oh yeah, Jensen. Not a lot of word about Jensen. He's a guy that has played on Team Liquid. I feel like Team Liquid probably wants a new mid laner. No offense to APA or Harry for that matter. What do you think about Jensen going back to Team Liquid? He could probably play with Sven and Core. You'd have
Yeah,
a veteran roster, but like that's already a pretty decent roster.
yeah. Honestly, that's actually pretty solid. Come to think of it, and it's all
Yeah,
players who have played not all together with each other, but who know each other for the most part.
yeah. Oh, and I also forgot about Spica because obviously he's been replaced on FlyQuest. So Spica's another guy. I think. Well, I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm not as hot on Spica as the LCS community is. I don't think. Um, I feel like especially this past year he underperformed, but also I don't think that he's been MVP Spica for some time now.
Never was.
Feel free to disagree with me. Pardon me?
Said never was.
Never was? Oh, yeah, yeah.
Just joking, obviously. Well, not joking, but
Yeah,
kind of
I don't
joking.
know. For people that are wondering what the hell we're talking about, when Spica won his MVP, I don't think either of us had him as the MVP, even though he
He
had
did
a good
not.
split.
He
Yeah,
had
that's what.
not to discredit his very good split. He was number two. Don't get me wrong, but he just wasn't number one.
Yeah, I think I had him number 3 that year. So, anyways, people will think that we're Spica haters now, but regardless, that's where that comes from. Anybody else that you want to talk about? Any other free agents that you think we need to hit on? I know we'll get to more free agency stuff later of like some of the smaller things, but anything big or any big player that you think needs to be shouted out as available?
I don't know. I'm just looking through the list here. I can't think of any. Yeah, not really. I guess one that's interesting, and it's purely just because I like this player and I'm interested to see what they do. Is what happens with Unforgiven? Just because I still think he's really good,
Ah, yes.
and I think it could be warranted for him to stay in the LCS. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see him go back to LEC, whether that was in the actual LEC or in a regional league of some sort.
Okay. Yeah.
Just because
Um,
that guy's really good. I don't give a damn. People even like I don't understand what like with 80 carries in the LCS. I really don't understand when people like how the community rates them, because the way that the community, in my opinion, rates LCS 80 carries is: are you getting a lot of kills? And if you are getting a lot of kills, that makes you a good 80 carry. And if you're not getting a lot of kills, that makes you a bad 80 carry. That's why
you're
people
forgetting.
love. Well, I'm just saying that's why people love, and not to say that these players aren't top 80 carries, your Doublelift, your Berserker, your Prince, your Danny, and whatnot. But I think, you have 80 carries like Unforgiven and FBI who really fly under the radar just their entire careers because they don't recognize sort of the little things that he's doing. And I think, really got to look at stuff like wave control and how you play the lane, and if you're helping your team set up objectives. And Unforgiven's a really good laner, very similar to the likes of the strong 80 carry laners that we've seen in the LEC that are very successful. He possesses those same traits, and even in the short amount of time we saw him on EG, yeah, he wasn't necessarily racking up, kills every single game, and felt like he just nobody even paid any attention to him, but he's actually really good.
He was solid, yeah, I would agree. But you're forgetting some really important piece here, J&T, because people will always look at not just 80 carries, but 80 carries especially. Do they take up an import slot? Because if they do, then suddenly that player that you think is playing well isn't playing that well. That's one important piece. And if they are taking up an import slot, they better damn well be Korean. then that's the other way that we judge 80 carries in North America. Prince running it down the whole split. It's okay. He's Korean. He's a beast.
Yeah.
Just saying. Okay, let's talk. What are we worlds now? We're gonna do quarterfinals, and then later on we'll get into the other like free agency announcements and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
Quarterfinals have come and passed. I mean, I guess we'll start from the beginning. And unfortunately, even though we tried to jinx it as hard as humanly possible in the previous episode, NRG, they fell 3-0 to Weibo Gaming. But looking at some of the other series that transpired, I'm looking at LNG versus T1, NRG actually put up a fight, which I can appreciate.
yeah, we did our job here. We predicted Weibo, and for the record, those were authentic predictions. Like we've been
Oh, yeah.
really good at being wrong this whole world, so we thought it was perfect. We thought like I genuinely thought Weibo would win since we've been wrong almost all of worlds. I was like, this is leading up for an NRG win. And they did show up like you mentioned, but clearly it still wasn't that close. Game 1 was the close one, right? Um, I guess my little bit of disappointment at NRG, from NRG was macro. They weren't able to push their Baron advantage when they got Baron. And their comp in fairness, was actually very difficult to execute. So in the game 1, that was the one where they're playing the Senatom, and as Kobe mentioned many times on broadcast, it was kind of like a kite back comp. The issue to me was that they were kiting back a little bit too quickly. So like they have river control, and this is way easier said than done, but they need to hold river and force the enemy team to engage onto them before backing out of river, before actually backing up. To me, they were just letting Weibo walk in, take all of river control, and then there's no more kiting back anymore. Weibo is not going to chase you if they already have control over river, so they could keep getting drags. That was the issue, or one of the issues in that game. I still thought NRG played well, and I was very like I was proud. I was a proud North American fan, even though they got 3-0 swept in quarters. I still thought they played pretty well. It's just those small things, the Baron, the macro. So Baron, they're not pushing their advantages enough, and then just giving up control. They're kiting back just a little bit too early in their kite back comp. I think if they fix those two things, they have a much better series, and it's much closer.
I thought they even played decently in the second game. Game 3 was really the only game where it was just a complete annihilation. Sure, game 2, you look at the gold graph and it was still like, they still had like a 4 or 5K gold lead at, 15 minutes or whatever it was. But Energy was actually still willing to engage and actually was doing probably the best that they could in terms of how poorly the game was going at that point. Because, the game also just reaches a certain point where you have no chance of winning the game when you're down 8K gold and it's 20 minutes and you're on 2 major items completed to 1 of the entire enemy team. But when the gold was relatively close, despite it still going in the favor of Weibo, I still thought in the game 2 Energy wasn't doing too bad.
The only thing that I could remember was that bot lane fight where Dokla, for I don't know what reason, just didn't TP, and both of the Weibo solo laners TP down to bot lane. That really swung the game. And I don't remember. That was another macro decision where I'm like, okay, like I normally when there's a TP play, I'm always saying that's a team play. Like they could have said, hey Dokla, don't TP here. To me, there's no world where you're not TPing there. Your whole team is fighting already. To me, that was very much on Dokla. Like you have to TP and join your team for a fight there. Weibo was able to have one guy TP join the fight, and then another TP started like after that, and then he joined the fight. And all through that whole like that would be like approximately 5 to 10 second range. Dokla still just stayed top and really didn't get much done there. That was the big discrepancy in that game. Was just a huge loss of that bottom lane fight. If you even remember which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, I think the major difference from the energy that we saw against the Weibo series and the energy that we saw versus G2 was just their decision making and their decisiveness. In the G2
Yeah.
series, they knew exactly what they wanted to do. You could see it in their gameplay. Once they saw something, once they figured out what to do, they did it, and they did it instantly. And in the Weibo series, there was a lot of dancing around and indecision. And I think you really outlined it well in the first game. How energy sort of didn't necessarily know they were basically failing the dance around dragon, and that ultimately is the downfall of many teams at the World Championship this year. But it was just completely evident in that first game. And
Yeah.
when you're indecisive on your plays, you're never going to win in league.
Since this is the first free agency episode, right? Since it kind of started, I kind of want to tie it back into, and I think we've made this clear before, but I think at this Worlds, it's very clear NRG proved that they can keep this team together and just run it back. I haven't heard anything of that yet. Have you?
No, I don't think there's been any word about if NRG is going to make changes, but I think I've said this in the past. I don't really like when teams in league sort of just automatically scrap a roster after one split to 1 year, especially if it's a
I
roster that
agree.
is at least somewhat relevant in the conversation of their region. Yeah, sure, you can easily you should scrap and replace rosters that are finishing towards the bottom of the standings. That's don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the teams that do go to Worlds, and yeah, maybe they quote unquote fail, but they at least keep some continuity going into next year, keep the same coaching staff system in place, and can just improve and build upon what you've already done. And I think that's what NRG should do. They should keep this roster. They should run it back again next year and just use the entirety of now until probably what is it going to be, the second or third week of January, to just keep growing and keep building.
Yeah. I'm with you that I think teams are blown up way too on a whim, for example. Um, and even in the past, I would also say that like I would have been okay with them replacing Dokla. And as much as I doubted him, and don't get me wrong, there were times to doubt him in the regular split in summer, even in spring as well. But like when the games mattered most, being LCS finals, he showed up and he proved me wrong. Worlds, he showed up and proved me wrong. And yes, there were some mistakes at Worlds. That's going to happen at Worlds. We see our top laners get gapped all the freaking time. That's nothing new. To me, he proved that he actually should belong on this team and they shouldn't blow it up whatsoever. I guess just to echo you, I agree. I think they should run back this roster for sure and just grow with what they have. It's such a success of a season. Yeah, I think it made a lot of North American fans proud. So this is a weird moment where you see your team get swept 3-0 and you're still like, don't care, success.
Yeah. And I don't know. It Unfortunately, NRG just got outclassed by Weibo. Like Weibo was simply better. There's not a
Yeah,
whole lot else about it. I think the places that were the most evident was top lane and bot lane. I think actually for the most part, Contracts and Palafox did a pretty good job of matching what Weibo was doing, especially in the early game when it came to the mid jungle. But I think also to be fair to Weibo, you could make the argument that mid jungle for Weibo is the weakest part of their team, and the strongest parts of their team are the Shy and Light. And if you watch the series, that was where the gap was quite evident, was top
yeah,
lane and bot lane.
agreed. Should we do the score out of 10 their whole season?
Yeah, their energy's been eliminated from Worlds. They're dead.
It's
Um,
so obviously 10 though, right?
yeah, it's
Like
10.
if so for those unaware, we give a score of 1 to 10 of how the whole season went coming in with expectations. I don't think anywhere would have the expectations of them one winning a title, two going further than any other western team at Worlds. Like it's so clearly a 10, but I just want to hammer home a couple of points here that like contracts was like the biggest what like 2 years ago, not even.
Yeah, a
It was
year and a half ago, he was
spring of
like,
last year was the worst player in my opinion in the LCS. I can't even say how fucking awesome it is how he had such a monster performance and how he's just become so much of a better player in such a short amount of time. That is obviously one reason to be so happy with this with their year. Like NRG by CLG, that is still the biggest fucking heist ever. And they instantly win a title and they go further than any other Western team. It's got to be a 10 for sure.
yeah, and I think just to even put it into perspective more, I don't even think that they needed to make top 8 at Worlds for it to be a 10. I think them getting to Worlds and even winning a few games in the Swiss stage already put it all the way up there for me. I think they could have, if they like, I know this didn't happen, but in the hypothetical world where NRG loses to G2 and then gets matched up with a Korean or Chinese team in the 2-2 part of Swiss stage and then loses, like, I still can't give them anything but a 10 because nobody expected this team to be a relevant team within the LCS. Nobody expected them to win any games in playoffs in the LCS. I mean, maybe the first series, but nobody expected them to beat both Team Liquid and Cloud9 in the finals weekend, and nobody expected them to do anything in the Swiss stage either. I think everybody was just getting ready for another NA number 1 seed failure, and that did not happen. And
And
it's a 10 out of 10.
I guess I should also add that like Palafox, FlyQuest fans will remember Palafox on FlyQuest. Things were not going well, and there were always people that still believed. I'm going to shout out Bjergsen. Bjergsen said a long time ago, like Palafox is a good mid laner, and people need to respect him more. He said that for some time now. I think we're starting to see what people are talking about because on FlyQuest he didn't look very good whatsoever. Yeah, he's looking really damn good now. He's one of the best mids we have in the league.
This
So that's it.
time last year, I was saying he should have got replaced from CLG,
That's
so
yeah, I forgot.
I'll own my statement there as well, like you owned your Dokla statement earlier.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, it's God. It. I don't know about you, Jinter, but like it feels a long time like we had something like this as an LCS fan. Like I last year's Worlds was disaster, man. So maybe that's why I'm so hyped up, just because this Worlds was so much better that like it just actually feels good for once. There's so much doomerism around the LCS, and I get why, but like it just was such a feels good, man, year for the LCS with the results at Worlds.
Yeah.
Um,
And we also forgot to do Cloud9's obituary last week. Plus, you also skipped over it when we were doing the Cloud9 section. So we got to do it now.
oh, double whammy. Can I just say one more thing about NRG?
Sure.
If they do make roster moves, they just better not. Contracts and Palafox have to be together. Okay? If there's anything that is done, I will go absolutely ape shit if those two are not together on a team. That's the last thing that I'll say. There's no world where those two aren't playing together, right?
You mean on NRG or like
Well,
they
it
have to be on the same
maybe
team
NRG.
anywhere?
Well, maybe esports winter's a thing, and NRG needs money or whatever, and another team buys them out. I think any team that has one piece should want the other. I think NRG's crazy if they give them up. But if they make any roster moves whatsoever, it better damn well not be jungler mid, right? I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Cloud9.
Yeah, when it comes to C9, I give him a 5. Um and maybe this is it's difficult because I feel like we have the benefit of hindsight moving into 2024 now because we kind of know what their roster is going to look like. But I've said this previously when we've done this segment when it comes to the obituary, but I think it's very important when you're going into the major part of the off season, which is between seasons as opposed to between splits. It is always important to have more answers than questions when it comes to your roster building. And
Hmm.
obviously, we have the benefit of hindsight here. But I think even before we learned what this Cloud9 roster was going to look like, the plan I thought was fairly obvious in terms of what you needed to do to upgrade this roster. Obviously, you change one or both of the solo lanes, and maybe you have to retool the bot lane. So I think regardless of the roster they were going to build in 2024, even though we know what it is now, most likely, I think you knew kind of there was a plan in place. And while yes, they did win the spring split, they went to MSI, had a decent performance there. They were the leading team in summer the entire way up until the finals. They lost the finals. They still went to Worlds and at MSI. Yeah, they didn't make it out of Worlds like they, for the most part, normally do. I think their success rate of getting out is like now it's 5 out of 8, I believe, or 5 out of 9 in terms of years that they've gotten out versus not gotten out. I gave
Pretty
them a
good.
5. Like,
I'm gonna give them. I think they should be a little bit happier than that. I'm gonna give them a 6 out of 10 here, maybe 7. I guess the way I'm looking at it from my perspective is you're coming into the year, you don't really know what you're gonna get out of your mid laner, right? It's Diplex at the time. You have two mids. You're hoping one of them pans out, and I don't think either one of them panned out to the point that like you're comfortable with it. Clearly not, or else they wouldn't be getting rid of, or they wouldn't be looking for a new mid, right? And clearly they did. Also, at the time, we still didn't know much about Sven's support. There was very little sample size on Sven playing the support role, and I think Sven had a good year overall. Um, I think you could argue that Cloud9's bot lane doesn't get that much done in the early game, and maybe that's one of the reasons why they're looking for why they look for a new support. Is like if it's Berserker popping off, it's usually late game and not so much in lane, for example. So maybe that's one of the reasons why they're getting rid of Sven. But I think overall, you're still pretty happy with an 80 carry main swapping into a new role and having a good year overall. So I feel like the 6 or a 7 is more fair for Cloud9, even though yes, they did falter at finals in summer. They had a good year from start to finish. Maybe not as good as they would have liked, but good overall. And then Worlds was okay. So I think I give it a 6, maybe a 7, maybe like a 6.5.
yeah, and honestly, maybe it's just a bit of recency bias, but it does feel difficult to give them a, I guess if you want to call it a higher score being a 6 or a 7, just because they were expected to win summer finals, actually didn't even look very good whatsoever in the finals against NRG, then kind of underperformed at Worlds. Yeah.
From your point of view, I get it though. As the Cloud9 fan that watched your team lose at finals, like I get that stings and like
No,
that's
but
something that
it's relative to their expectations. Despite it doesn't
yeah,
matter of me being a Cloud9 fan, everyone thought that that C9 was gonna dick on NRG, and that completely didn't
okay.
happen. And I'll say it again: the solo lanes look really bad the majority of summer. They were not good. They were just bang average at best.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got the the scores of 1 to 10 out of the way, we want to get to the next quarterfinal series. It was GenG and BLG.
I told you. I told you.
What did you
This was
tell
going to be
me?
a banger series.
Okay, that's like everyone says
What do
that.
you mean? Well, I'm just saying I told you because you said that this was going to be a 3-0 Gen sweep. Pack it up. Let's go
Yeah, I
home.
am. I mean, yeah, I'm not claiming to be
And I told
correct
you it was
here.
going to be a
I'm
banger.
saying it's going to
Admittedly,
be
I
a
got
banger.
the 5-game banger in the wrong direction because I had Gen G on the 3-2. But
It was. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's disaster that Gen G doesn't make it past quarters, but it was
absolute
looking
disaster.
real. It was looking real disaster. It was looking like it was about to be a 3-0. They almost turned it around. Clearly not enough.
That was the weirdest part about it. Is it felt like Gen G, like it took them the first 2 games to wake up, basically. Like,
It did, and I remember thinking that they were going to win game 5, and I was like, on CFP this week, I'm probably gonna be talking about how, like, it took them the time to find themselves, but once they did, now they're a powerhouse, and now they're gonna go all the way, and then they lost game 5. It's like, okay, well, throw that narrative out the window. They just didn't look very good. You need to play a whole series. It's that simple. Doran didn't have a good series. Peanut didn't
yeah,
have a good
we
series. Like,
spent the last 2 episodes praising Doran, and then he just gets absolutely shat on.
bro,
Like,
if
come
not
on,
for that
bro.
series, if not for that series, I probably would have said Doran was their best player. At Worlds specifically, this tournament. I would have said Doran. He was having a great tournament.
Yeah, maybe. Honestly,
He
maybe.
was trash. Now, I think I'd probably give that to Delight now. Chovy had some good games, but even the Akali was a little bit in this series. Delight looked great. The rel engages were fantastic. I think that was one of the reasons that they were still in this series was Delight. But yeah, still underwhelming for what is supposed to be one of the world's favorites. Like you still got to win this series, and you got to show up for all the games, man.
That was the most confusing part to me was the fact that, like I said, Genji just wasn't even there in the first 2 games. It was I mean, the first 2 games of the series looked exactly like the first 2 games of T1 versus LNG, where the one team, in this case being BLG, they just kind of were allowed to do whatever they want, and GenG put up no resistance whatsoever. It was like they weren't even trying; they were just on autopilot. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell it was,
It
but
was the,
something didn't
it
look
was
right.
the weirdest series I'd seen up until the LNG T1 series that just happened last night.
And on the other side, BLG, I mean, I guess the first guy that comes to mind is Shun because I don't know if he played every game as Jarvan, but his Jarvan
Every
was
game,
fucking
yeah.
good.
There was
Was it
even a
every game?
stat. There was a stat that they threw out. Even like this is actually the second time where a single player has played the same champion in every game in a 5-game series.
I mean, why not though? I would keep running if they're not going to ban it. Yeah, I'm running that back. Sheesh. Shun had a great series, which is kind of nice to see because I mean, we just need to look to was it last week when we were talking about his Nidalee? It was not good.
Yeah, it
Not
was
good.
last week.
Yeah.
He's another guy
Yeah.
we were wrong about.
Yeah, I want to see the Nidalee again. I want to see it one more time. I have faith. I think that'd be hype if he pulls out the Nidalee one more time. If he runs it down, then he looks like an idiot, though. But if he could save himself, he could save himself if he has a good Nidalee game. The other guy I want to shout out is Bin. I
He's the front runner for like MVP of the tournament,
That
worlds,
was going
whatever
to
it
be my
is. Like
question.
I
Okay,
can't remember. Are they also doing like they're doing finals MVP and a worlds MVP? Like I think they announced that they're doing that.
I don't know.
Okay, either way, I think they did announce that they are not only doing a finals MVP but just a whole worlds MVP. And
Hmm.
regardless, I think up until this point, Ben has been the best player at the tournament. I think. I
Yeah, I
think
think so
the
too.
only other players you can probably throw in there is Ruler. Like there's Ruler, and maybe you put in
Come on,
like what's the come on? I don't know. I was saying like maybe somebody
BDD.
on T1. I don't know. Well, I don't know.
BDD has had a great term. We'll get to that though. I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Bin is the front runner. That was the question I was going to ask you: is who's the front runner for MVP? I think it is
Ben,
Bin at the moment. Yeah.
obviously.
Well, and what's funny is that Doran was having a great tournament until he ran into Bin. Even more reason to shine a light on like just how good that performance is. Doran was having a great tournament, and
Yeah.
instantly wasn't.
We were
Also,
singing his praises last week, and then he just got dumped on by Ben. And not to say that we didn't think that Ben was going to win against Doran, because I think I said that. I was like, Ben should still be favored over Doran, but not favored to the point where he's getting solo killed a bunch of times and is just cannot do anything in lane.
it didn't look like a China versus Korea matchup. in the top lane specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Although maybe you could say no, I guess it did look like a 5-game bang. Okay, yeah, that part's true. But I meant in the top lane. That was what I meant. Uh, yeah, I don't got nothing more to say on the series. Just like, damn, BLG. Okay, I see you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only other thing to talk about from the GenG side, because I mean, we talked about a bit about Delight and Doran, is Chovy, unfortunately, is just gonna continue to get this reputation of being a choker, and
Chokey.
yeah, and while it could be an unfair designation, you know, some could argue you also have to look at it from the standpoint that this guy has not been further than World's quarterfinals in his whole career.
That is wild when you
I'm
think
pretty
about
sure I have
that.
that. And if he made semis, it would have been one time, but I don't even think so because it wasn't last year. No, I guess he made world semis last year. Sorry, I just lied. But anyways,
Oh,
they should have lost that series anyways against Damwon. Best.
yeah.
We don't need to get down the rabbit hole again. We do it.
Canyon and
We do it every
Showmaker
other
were
month.
doing, yeah. Canyon and
Yeah.
Showmaker were doing everything they could in that
But
series.
anyway,
Okay.
Jovi's in only one time in his whole tenure of going to worlds, which has been the last 5 worlds. He's only made it past quarterfinals once. And you compare that to the stat that everyone was bringing up when it comes to Faker, and him being at Worlds, he's been to Worlds 8 times and made semifinals or better every single time.
I mean, he's made finals at least 5 times.
He has, yes. But the
Yeah.
fact that all the world championships he's attended, he's been in the semifinals at the very least is insanely impressive. And yeah, sure, it maybe is a bit unfair to hold Chovy to that same standard, but the problem is when you talk about a player who has been one of the best players in their respective region for a number of years now, and I think everybody wants to label Chovy as the best player in the world, you really can't do that without the international success.
I agree. And it's not that he hasn't played well internationally. It's just that he hasn't played well enough to go far enough to like. Whenever you're talking about like the greatest player or anything like that, it always comes with individual performance, but also you need some accolades there, right? Like Faker is not talked about as the GOAT without 3 championships. It's just not happening. Chovy, you got to believe he'll get there though, right?
Yeah,
Maybe he
maybe.
is choky. Maybe he's
I
choky.
mean,
And he's
Doran did say in an interview after series that they expect there to be a different GenG roster moving forward. So
ooh.
changes
Doran's
once
calling the
again.
shots.
Well, I don't
I
know
wonder
if
if Doran's referring to himself.
yeah,
Like,
I
I'm
don't
out of
know if he
here.
was calling the shots like he's the guy, but he could be one of the guys. Because I mean, you think about what GenG did from last year to this year was replacing the bot lane from Ruler and was it Lehens last year? Ruler and Lehens? I think it was, and now it's Pays and Delight, and you'd have to assume that they stick with Pays and Delight. I think I've said
Yeah.
this many times. I'm a massive fan of Pays. That guy's insane.
How do you think they decide? Like, they probably interview all the players and they're probably all like, yeah, we think there should be changes next year. But none of them have it in mind that it's them that's being replaced.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, it would probably be Jungle and Top, maybe, because I don't think you'd want to get rid of Chovy, and I don't think you'd want to get rid of your bot lane because your bot lane was one of the best parts of your team this entire year.
I get my guess is that they all just bring their fiery torch and then they write on a ticket and they put it in the bucket and then they vote who they're and then they survive their way out of there. And then just whoever's the last one gets their torch put out and then they move on. What do you think? Good system?
Yeah,
Okay, good. Next
we're
series.
going with the CLG 2015 strat.
True. True. Everyone say something you don't like
Yeah.
about somebody else.
Yeah.
Good system, CLG. Oh god, miss you already. Okay, JDG and KT.
Yeah, your boys unfortunately fell
Dude,
to the gods that are JDG and Ruler.
I've dreaded having to talk about this. I've suppressed all of my thoughts. What can I
I thought
say?
they were gonna win that fourth game. I told you this. Like
Me too, man.
they were hitting Baron. They had just pushed JDG off, and I was like, oh yeah, this game's over. I literally got into bed because I was like, I'm too tired to stay up for this fifth game anyway. Like I'm going to bed, and I'll find out who won the fifth game when I woke up. And then I kind of like looked over again at my computer as I was just sitting in bed, and was like, oh, they
The
just
2v
lost the fight at Baron, and the gold is now even within like 4 minutes. Oh no.
the 2v4 play is the one that is gonna have a that's gonna have a lasting memory in everyone's minds from this series.
Yes.
And You know what? I will keep saying it. I've said it a million times. BDD has had a great tournament, but that is a BDD fuck up there. That is a bit, and it was him and Lehens, I think, that both got caught. Full credit to Knight. Nice shockwave, right? But like, you're just a little bit careless about Oriana. They should have known Oriana was on the other side of the wall. The Oriana ball is sitting in the pit. You know he's there.
Hmm.
Um, just didn't respect it, and that goes to show you why you should buy pink wards, kids, because that was all JDG needed was a pink ward on that side of the pit. BDD thought he was safe. He ends up obviously dying. Ruler and Knight just 2v4 to come back, steal Baron, and then things aren't the same anymore. BDD had a fucking wild good tournament. I am really happy about that, but that was a really big mistake. And even though even that game, his Syndra was great, and then it just wasn't all of a sudden.
Yeah, you look at the first game. KT basically put everyone on notice after that first game, to be honest, because I think everyone was under the assumption that JDG was just going to run through KT, especially considering that JDG started on blue side, and obviously blue side being the favorite side, normally has resulted in blue side getting the first win in the majority of all of these best of series since the beginning of the Swiss stage. Now, like you said, or like I just said, KT just absolutely took it to them in the first game, and I think surprised a lot of people. And then even in the games 2 and 3, like for the most part, the series was actually pretty close. While JDG did end both games 2 and games 3 pretty strong and decisive, the first 15 minutes of the game, which is supposed to be JDG's, not to say their strength, because their strength is team fighting, but they're still a pretty good early game team for the most part when you talk about these LPL teams. And KT was going blow for blow in the early game, which I think was the most impressive part.
They had me convinced that they were going to do it. Just all it took was one game. I was like, "Yep, they got this. They're going to shock everyone." I'm so excited. Didn't happen. God, Lehens, I think he's had a rough tournament. I think Cuz was kind of useless and not the whole series. He actually had a really good Vi game in there. Um, Viego's fucking useless. That was this series, right? I'm not crazy. I'm not getting that mixed up.
I've maintained my stance that Viego's useless since like summer split at this
Dude,
point.
that champion stinks, man. I don't know if it
Hey,
was like game. Someone tells me it was game two. Might have been game three.
we won't
I
we
don't
don't
remember
even need
anymore.
to get into this Gragas top thing that was going on also, because that was also
No,
rough
we
to
we
watch.
should. We should. 369 made Gragas top viable in lane.
He did,
Afterwards, maybe
dude.
not as much.
That's funny because that's how bad Gragas top is. 369 was playing as well as he possibly could in that fourth game in lane and was still losing lane
Yeah.
because Gragas is just so bad in lane now.
I am a believer. I trust you, JNT. I trust you, and I think you're right. But yeah, you still got to give full credit for 369 making that champion look viable. I'm fully bought into what you say. Gragas in lane sucks. What else happened in that series? I don't even remember anymore.
I mean, it was just a team fighting gap. Like that's all it really was. Like both.
Knight also had like a huge wombo, maybe a couple Nico game. The Nico game was kind of popping off. He had like a 4-man, maybe a 5-man ulti. He was at like Baron or Rift Herald area. Knight had a really good series. He's having a really good tournament. Maybe his name should be thrown into the MVP discussion because if he continues to play the way he is, I could see him being the MVP as well.
Maybe. I think he kind of has two. I mean, there's a player on his team who's performing better than he is, so which would be
Who's
Ruler.
that?
Ruler.
Really? I Ruler did not have that great of a start to the tournament. When they went 3-0 in the round robin, to me, I was like, not that, oh, you won your game. How dare you not play better? But like, it wasn't like those wins to me were not Ruler based. So I don't know if I would throw Ruler in there. I think I would have Knight ahead of Ruler.
Well, either way, I mean, I think you look at the series games 2 to 4, and it was just a team fight gap. That's all
Yeah.
it was. There's a reason why JDG is viewed as the best team in the world, and it's because of their team fighting. And if that wasn't apparent, I would urge you to go back and look at MSI 2023 when they were literally winning 40-minute team fights 4v5. They would lose a jungler or a support and then would team fight 4v5 and still find a way to win. And you saw that in this series. Pretty much any team fight that JDG took from even or even one man down, they still won. There was the 2v4 in game 4. There was multiple like 4v4s that happened in game 2. And yeah, it's just a team fighting gap.
Yeah. Also, how about that fucking cannon minion killing the Nexus, by the way?
That was so funny.
Dude, I thought that they saved it. I was jumping up and down because I thought they saved the game.
It was
I
funny.
turned around and the Nexus was dead. Like I was up in here, I was jumping around like, yes, they're holding on, they're gonna come back. I look back at the monitor and the game's over, and I was like, what the fuck happened?
Baroned up cannon minions are too OP.
Yeah. Okay, LNG T1. Not the way I thought this was gonna go.
Yeah, like I kind of said earlier, this was the weirdest series that I ever saw. And similar to the GenG versus BLG series, LNG just didn't wake up for the first two games. They literally did nothing. They
Scout
did
and Tarzan lost their goddamn minds,
they
man. I
did
don't know what the fuck happened.
absolutely nothing in the first two games.
Game one, instantly worried when they engage mid on not at the same time. That was so weird. You had like the Azir try to go in, and then it didn't work out, and then all of a sudden Tarzan's like, "Hey, I'll follow," and then he full combos Faker, and Faker just shockwaves him, kills him. That is when I was like, "Oh shit, maybe something's wrong with LNG."
Yeah, I mean, if anything, the most damning thing in that first game and the reason for concern, right off the bat, was the Blitzcrank pick and the lack of, like I said, anything happening. The only play that they forced whatsoever with the Blitzcrank was like flashing mid lane to blow Senna's flash.
Mm.
And I just
The
thought it was,
Blitzcrank pick was trash.
and it's not even a case that like LNG is like they're losing, so like they're getting behind, so you kind of expect them to lose at a certain point. It's the fact that they never even tried to do something from a losing position. Like they were clearly like they were losing the early game. That's not a huge surprise because T1, the best part of their team in the past, the best part of this T1 team has been their early games. That's what everyone says is the best part of this T1 roster, specifically in the spring split. But look at the series against LNG, and LNG presumably knew this, yet they drafted in a way that was going to allow them to fight early, then chose not to, then when behind with a chance to get back into the game, they then also chose not to fight.
Yeah, you mentioned um, a draft. It makes me think of red side and T1 basically showing us how to use red side, like reminding us all like, hey, there's actually sometimes that you can use red side to your advantage. And T1 basically was like, hey, you remember how we used to just play a bunch of 80 carries in the bot lane and no one could answer us and we would just win all the time? And they were like, oh yeah. And then they did that. And then they brought out what, Varus, Ashe, what else did they bring out? Senna.
Yeah, they played Senna Nyla in the first game, and then they played Varus Ashe in the third game, with Varus something else in the second game.
That shit was awesome. Like that was great. Definitely made me change the way I'm looking at T1.
Oh,
And I
sorry.
think
Varus
uh,
Renata was the other combo they played.
okay. I think it was a T1 player. I think it was Zeus, and I'm paraphrasing here, but in the post game interview, he said basically like the meta is not set. We decide the meta, and it was like, yeah, clearly you do. So that made me look at T1 completely differently when like they're willing to just pull out this stuff in obviously really big matches. Um, yeah, I was a little bit cold on this team, especially with how their tournament started. Looking a lot better. So yeah, I don't know. Zeus had a great series. My God.
Oh my god, dude! Is like his 0-0-0 Aatrox was like the most fed Aatrox you've ever seen for being 0-0-0.
The Aatrox, the Jason game 3. Sheesh, man. What, you remember the play where like he just keeps landing shock blast after shock blast and the
Like the
crowd keeps going? That was wild.
that was
No,
so
wasn't that
funny.
awesome? That was awesome.
I just liked how it
Um,
was like just a chain reaction with the crowd. Every time a shock blast would go off, you hear the whoa.
yeah,
It
that was
happened on
great.
like a 3-second cooldown, basically.
Yeah, that was really really cool. And then the other play that stood out is Owner with the Poppy invade, where I was like, oh, this isn't looking too good. He's fighting the Sejuani,
Oh, dude,
and I thought he was losing
Sedge
it.
wasted his W. Sedge wasted his W, and that was the reason he lost.
But the flash pin was really nice because it's very easy to miss that part of the wall. If people don't know what I'm talking about, just go to, was it game 3? Do I have it in my? I don't
I
have it
think
in my notes
it
here.
was game 3. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, whatever game it was, I think it was at the start of game 3. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to that game, T1 LNG game 3, and you'll see that Owner has a really nice poppy stun into the wall and, well, gets the game going really, really early. So, all this to say, yeah, I completely switched how I thought of both of these teams, just added to the list of times that I've been wrong for this tournament. LNG, I thought they were going to shock everyone and win it all, and they're just done.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get the Scout versus Faker matchup that everyone wanted to, especially after the cinematic, because everybody, they've been going pretty hardcore with the cinematics
Mm,
or no, the teasers, I should say, not a cinematic, but the
yeah.
teasers for Worlds, and they've been really good. And the whole the whole thing was about the Faker versus Scout, and Scout was just completely invisible this entire series, didn't do a single thing.
Speaking of Faker, J&T, you brought up the question: can T1 sweep the LPL? They have to now, right? Because Faker has not lost to a Chinese team. That's the new narrative.
Yeah, well, at
Uh,
Worlds, at Worlds.
yeah, yeah. Do you think they're gonna do it?
I think they can do it. I would
Okay, come on.
argue. Well, I mean, I feel like we maybe should switch to our semifinals matchups
Okay,
potentially. If
yeah,
we
we can do that.
if we want to stick on the train of T1 and talk about T1 versus JDG, uh, the biggest thing that they have going for them in that series is the fact that T1's early game is the best part of their game. And obviously, you look at JDG, and this is a team who can pretty much team fight their way out of anything. And if you're T1, the one and only game plan that I feel like you have to follow is you need to get a lead in the early game. And, who knows, maybe T1, they can have a lot of confidence in themselves and be like, hey, we're going to beat JDG at team fighting. And if they want to go for that, that's a tall task. Good luck with that. But their easiest road to success here is to pick a lot of early game dominant type things. Try to force some of these double range bot lane matchups that T1 seems to like so much and win through that. And yeah, I think they can do it.
I still think JDG is better, but this series is way closer than I thought it would be.
Same. I think if you asked me to predict this series before T1 beat BLG to advance, like I guess for
And
me,
completely dismantled
yeah,
LNG just a second ago.
yeah, I mean, despite the LNG series, the turning point was definitely that matchup they had against BLG in the Swiss stage. Because, like I said, I was really worried for T1. I thought BLG was going to beat them, and I think that BLG is a really bad matchup for T1. So the fact that that wasn't the case and they actually 2-0'd BLG pretty quickly definitely makes me a lot more favorable on the T1 side of things.
Yeah, I still think I have Knight as the big favorite over Faker, which is a very dangerous thing to say.
Yeah, people were saying that about him versus Scout in this past
When
series, and
Faker is at
then
Worlds.
I thought Faker was gonna solo bolo Scout in the first minute of game one, or like the first minute of lane phase. Like I thought that was like a
Yeah.
solo kill. I thought he was gonna flash auto his ass down, but
It started so well, and then he just kind of died under tower when he got ganked. He was like he could have just left and then walked right back in and died. That was kind of, come on, Faker. Yeah, but I know this is a bold move here, but I'm still going to give the edge of Knight over Faker, and I think that's one of the biggest discrepancies here. I'm really interested in the bot lane though, because clearly they're going back to their hey, let's just play this Hail of Blades crap and just go nuts. I want to see how JDG responds to that. So that's where I'm looking the most. But overall, JDG, I'm giving the edge, and I'm going to go with 5 game banger. I'm going 3-2.
yeah, I'm going for T1 just purely for the story and me being a Faker fanboy. So I would like to make that very clear. Because I do think that if I was truly predicting with the brain, I'd probably pick JDG, but
I very much want LCK
you
LPL
can't not
finals.
root for
Like,
T1.
yeah, I want T1 to win this really badly. As cool as it would be to see like the Golden Road, is that what they're calling it?
Yeah, that's what it's called.
For JDG to win Spring, MSI, Summer, and then Worlds, that would be cool. I really want LCK LPL finals. I was really afraid that we were going to get 4 LPL teams in semis. That would have sucked.
Yeah,
Okay, I
it
got
honestly would have sucked, but it would have been kind of cool at the same time. But I
we both got
prefer
5 games, but you got T1, I got JDG.
yep. Baker
Okay, then we
is
got
the main storyline of the world championship. So
what else is new?
all the other protagonists are done, and Faker is the one that remains.
That is quite that's a common thing. Okay, then we got Weibo BLG. I am not that sold on Weibo still.
Yeah, I got BLG.
Yeah, me too. Um, where to give Weibo the edge?
I
Not
mean,
top.
well, I think you can probably
Kashai's
make.
been good.
Well, I think you can make the argument that Bin maybe doesn't have an advantage in the top lane. Not to say that the Shy has the advantage. I don't think either side has the advantage, just based on the
I
way that they're
am
playing.
no, come on, man. If we're saying that Bin's gonna be he's the front runner for MVP, how can we not give him the edge right now?
Okay, well, he's got a slight edge then.
And that's not to say this is very much a not the Shy can't do it, but like we got like a what a 60-40 edge or a 70-30 edge for BLG, whatever number you want to give. It's not that the Shy can't do it. It's that you have to give the edge to the guy that we're saying is the MVP front runner right now. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and he has the slightest of edges in my book.
Okay. Where else could you give the edge to Weibo, if anywhere?
Maybe the bot lane. Honestly, to be fair, Elk has not been as dominant as I thought he'd be. He's still been pretty good for the most part, don't get me wrong. But you compare what he looks like at Worlds to MSI 2023, and it hasn't been as good. So, and actually on the flip side, Light and Crisp have actually been really, really good, I think. So, if
I thought
anything, I think
Elk.
the bot lane dynamic is closer than it probably looked like to begin the tournament.
Yeah, I still thought Elk had a really good series though in quarters. So like I don't. Yeah, I don't really give the edge anywhere to Weibo. I think it's all slight edge to BLG. So I got BLG taking it 3-1.
I think it's actually me a pretty close series. I think, we kind of had a lot of boring series. I mean, I guess the only series that wasn't boring, to be fair, was NRG Weibo. But I think two LPL teams definitely makes for a non-boring best of five. And I see a 3-2 BLG. I think it'll
Okay.
actually be closer than a lot of people expect.
At this point, who do you got winning worlds? Since GenG's
Um,
gone, you had GenG, I had LNG. Both were already wrong there. Do we dare make another wrong prediction?
I don't know. Maybe BLG.
I'm going BLG also.
Like
Okay. So we both are saying BLG. People need to understand that there's a good reason to bet against BLG now.
yeah, it's hard to say. Like the problem, like that the 2-0 that T1 beat BLG at the end of the Swiss stage is just really my only hesitation to not just pick BLG as the outright favorite.
Okay. Hmm. All right. Well, BLG, new pick. Anything else on either of the series, or do we want to get into the rest of the free agency stuff?
I think that's it.
Kind of like a quick news kind of thing,
Yeah,
kind of sorta.
we did already do a little bit of discussion with some of the major NA teams and their moves that they've made in free agency so far, but we do have some other NA teams that are making some moves, albeit not the
Hmm.
biggest moves and not the brightest stars or the biggest names, but one thing very important because we're talking about North America, NA talent, Insanity got his contract extended with Shopify, so he's going to be for sure the mid laner for that team going into next year, which is obviously deserved and is really really good because Insanity was really good last year
Yeah,
or this year, I should say.
I think that signing is great. I'm just waiting for Chime. I need them to say confirm that they're keeping Chime because if they don't get Chime, I think they're crazy.
Yeah, the other thing to note with Shopify, formerly TSM, is that Boogie, their jungler, and Revan, their head coach, are the only other people who are currently contracted to the end of 2024. Now, Insanity's contract was set to expire at the end of this year, but as I said, he just extended it. So, as of right now, it would seem that the only people on Shopify that are locked in is Revan, Boogie, and Insanity.
Okay, and Boogie was solid. He wasn't the greatest jungler, but he was definitely had a solid year. So I think that would be another valuable piece. And then
Deserving of retaining his spot, I would say.
we don't think that Hanser will stick around, or at least we don't. Yeah, we don't know, but we don't think. And then same thing with Wild Turtle. We're not expecting that either.
Probably not, if I had to guess.
If I had to guess, also no. But again, this is just guessing, just to be clear. What else we got, Jinter?
Next up, down to some of the shitter teams now, unfortunately.
Oof.
Immortals, they both have made verbal agreements with Mask and Armeo. Mask being a mid laner. If people don't know who he is, he previously played for Unicorns of Love Sexy Edition. Just small tangent. You gotta love the Unicorns of Love brand, just of how they brand their shit.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of people that were really upset about hearing this because, like, oh, you're immortals and like you're importing and imports bad and blah blah blah. The only thing that I would have to say on that is like, who is the alternative? And the only reason I bring that up is because I don't think there's that many mids that are like, you know, all that great. Um, it wouldn't surprise me if there's not that many mids available. And again, everyone got rid of all their freaking challenger players, so it's like I don't know who the hell else was like available. Maybe that's the reason why they felt they needed to go with an import. I totally understand people being upset with another import because we've seen it fail many, many times, and I don't expect Immortals to be much different. But yeah, that's the only thing that I could come up with in my head. That, and also I think Armao deserves to play in the LCS. I just feel bad that he has to play with Immortals.
Uh, yeah, I kind of agree, honestly. And I mean, you kind of just were talking about the reasons of why they maybe imported somebody, but I think we got to reiterate this point that the both of us have made this year when talking about Immortals. If we were players or managing players or at all involved in terms of decision making of where players land, I wouldn't personally I would not say to go to Immortals for any player that's looking to be a pro in League of Legends and playing in North America. I just straight up wouldn't go to Immortals. So maybe it was the case that they had free agency options and maybe some of those were North American for Immortals and maybe they didn't want to go.
The biggest problem that I had when I saw this signing wasn't that they signed an import or wasn't that Armeo was signed. It was that Immortals still exists in the LCS. I was fully expecting that team to be sold. So, and maybe they still get sold, but yeah, I was not like, oh, import. I was like, wait, this team's not fucking gone? Like, kick this team out of here, man. The LCS can use that clause or whatever. Get rid of this fucking team. I'm not the only one saying this. This is not a hot take. This feels very obvious. Get rid of this goddamn team.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I didn't think they'd probably still be here at this point. I would have
How
expected
are
them
they
to
still
sell.
here, man? Maybe I'm
Um,
getting ahead of myself. Maybe they announce tomorrow they're gone and they're just signing and they're gonna all the signings that they made goes to another org and then we're all happy.
well, we can hope for that. Next up, Dignitas. They, I sorry, I should have prefaced this by saying that all of this info that we're talking about when it comes to free agency and the rumors and whatnot, is on Sheep Esports. And I think I mentioned them last week. They're sort of ran by the Pokemon
Wooloo.
Twitter accounts, LCSEV and LEC Wooloo, and a few others as well. But shout out to them and be sure to check out their website. It's really good. But like I said, Dignitas, they're promoting XU, who was their Challengers League jungler, to the starting role. And they've also released Tomo, Diamond, Poom, and their head coach from the team.
Enatron.
Enatron. I
Yeah.
didn't even want to attempt the name, but there you go.
Yeah. He's been there a little while, Enatron, I think. I think he's been there a couple years now.
Yeah, he was
Um,
there since last year when Blue was on the team.
right. I remember there was a player that he had coached before that he came over with. I couldn't remember who it was.
I'll say it again.
Blue.
Blue got done dirty. He was actually good.
Yeah. Blue
Like,
was not that bad. Agreed.
yeah,
This is a blue positive podcast.
yep.
Uh, whatever, man. I don't. So I like XU. I actually really like him as a player. I don't know how good he is, but just his personality that I've seen, I
I
think he's
mean,
like a nice dude. That's it. That's
important
all I can say.
important to note was that Dig was actually the runners up for Challengers League in summer. So
Okay. Yeah, no, from what I've seen of the player, I like him on like on content and stuff. I've seen very little, but I
I
thought he
think
was just a cool
he
dude.
also played a game or two. I think this past year. I think he subbed in
Did
for a
he
game or
play
two.
when there was lock in last year? Is that where we saw him
Mm,
play?
maybe,
I
but
think we've seen him play. I just don't remember when it was. Maybe it was just maybe they just subbed in players at like the end of summer last year or something. I don't know.
actually,
But we have seen him.
I want to say, sorry, he actually played when they traded River. Was that when it happened? I think when they
Okay,
traded
that might be
River to
right.
Golden Guardians at the end of
Hold on.
2022.
They had a jungler named Will, didn't they? Was it him that played? Maybe they
Maybe,
used both?
maybe.
God, we are not we should have looked into this stuff, but I mean, who gives a fuck? Happy to see that he's promoted. I hope he's a good player. Seems like a nice dude. That's all I can say. I don't watch enough of his games to really have a strong opinion. Dignitas looks like they're going back to budget mode. They tried 1 year, they spent on Santorin, they spent on Jensen. Clearly, that wasn't enough.
And
Uh,
Armut, don't forget about him.
yeah, just yeah, and Rich.
Yeah. And then last up, Revenged. He announced that I just realized I said Revenged. I just realized I said it. So
You always say that. I just stopped
okay,
interrupting you
but
with that.
now I
That's
just
a
caught myself. So
okay.
Revenge. He's a free
I
agent.
am going to call you out because earlier you made fun of me for shitting on Revenge, kind of, sort of, not really. But then at the start of this segment, you said all the shitter teams. And below the shitter teams, you put Revenge JNT 250. Do you have anything to say for yourself?
I taking the fifth.
Haha, checkmate.
Uh,
I hope he's in the league. Okay, like we are not Revenge believers, but we are Revenge fans, right? That's how
yeah.
we always
Mhm.
preface this. People may think we're Revenge haters, and I totally get why you think that. But I want to see this guy succeed. I just hope to God he doesn't have to go back to fucking Immortals.
Yeah, please God, don't sign to Immortals, don't sign to Dignitas. Honestly, Revenge to Shopify. That'd be a good move.
Okay, question for you. Revenge gets no offers except for Immortals. Does he take it?
He should not know.
Does he take it?
He might, but he shouldn't.
uh, I think he might take it.
I mean, maybe he needs the money. To be fair, isn't he also like?
He played with Armao.
Well, no, I was gonna say like, doesn't he have like? He's a really smart guy, and he was supposed to be a doctor, right? Like he stopped pursuing being a doctor to play League. Like he's a
So you're
smart guy, so.
saying instead of Immortals, he should just go back to like doctor school.
Well, I'm saying if the choices are play on Immortals or like stop playing League and go make six figures being a doctor, like maybe do that. I don't know.
He should just be the LCS doctor
He should
whenever
do
someone is
Revenge should
sick.
do whatever he wants to do.
Okay. Revenge needs to I like that guy needs to make a playoff run. He needs something. He needs not Immortals. Okay, that's it for the North American stuff, right? Oh, we didn't talk about I think you wanted to mention Closer earlier, and I think we forgot about that. Was there anything about Closer? Any ideas where you think
I
Closer should go?
didn't, but that's okay.
Oh, we did talk about that?
Well, I don't think we did, but I don't. I mean, I don't know. Closer can go play somewhere, sure.
Do you think
Like
okay.
he's not. We already know he's not going to be playing on C9. He's not going to be playing on NRG. He's not going to be playing on FlyQuest. He's not going to be playing on 100 Thieves. Like all the
You know,
top
you're
teams are
getting to
gone.
my question. You're getting to my question, which is like, where would this guy fit, if anywhere? Is there any team that you're like, yeah, I could see them going for a closer? Or do you think this year was so bad that the closer stocks are just,
Well, I mean,
run dry?
his stock is definitely down.
Yep,
But
for
I
sure.
I'll still maintain that he's definitely not as problematic as he was made out to be by the community. But you kind of just look at the landscape of the league, and you're not going to be playing on a top team, unfortunately, because all the top teams have their junglers already, and the only team that you could probably go to that is more likely than not going to be using veteran talent is maybe Team Liquid. So there you go.
It's not happening, right?
What, him to Team Liquid or him playing on in the LCS next year?
Him to Team Liquid. I mean, playing in the LCS also maybe, but definitely not Team Liquid, right?
I don't know where else. Like that's my point.
I, I don't know. Immortals has Armeo. Dig has XEU. EG, they still need a jungler.
Yeah, but
TSM slash
that team
Shopify.
is going to be contending for the bottom of the standings.
We think Shopify is going to go with Boogie, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, there's not a lot of spots. There's just not.
I mean, he's another guy who has the options to probably go to different regional leagues or even potentially the LEC. Like he's good enough to probably play there.
Yeah. It's really sad because Closer was one of the best junglers in the league minus this year, right? That's what like God, he just fell off so hard so quick. It's I hope he gets an opportunity to rebound. It would be cool if he went back to Turkey and like proved himself again because it is stop me if I'm wrong here. Is Turkey now like one of the minor regions for LEC? Is it like LFL and stuff like that?
Yeah, but they
Like
can't
that would be
like.
cool to see him go to the LEC and like make a name over there. That'd be cool. I would cheer for Closer for sure.
Well, yeah. Are you saying he's in the LEC or he's in like an?
Well, you go to Turkey, you prove yourself again on one of those teams, and then one of the LEC teams wants you.
Maybe, yeah. I think there's probably it would all depend on what he wants. If he wants to go play internationally, maybe it makes more sense for him to go to CB LOL or else like one of those like other leagues.
Okay. Europe stuff now.
Yeah, there's a couple of EU things. Number one, which is kind of relevant because BDS was just at the World Championship. It's being rumored that Crowny is not going to be starting for BDS next year. And it's important to note that BDS have already uh, released their current head coaches and signed new head coaches.
Did you see the LS tweet? where he said something along the lines of like anyone pinning the BDS performance on Crowny. Do you know what I'm talking about or no?
Yeah, I did see that.
Was it just me or was like Crowny not that good this tournament? Like no offense, like he had a good year overall, but at Worlds,
Yeah,
like
he
I
definitely.
can see people pointing the finger to Crowny. No,
Yeah, I mean, LS was definitely just sort of protecting his boy.
which
Um,
like I understand the urge to do that. Like we are fans of players as well, but like Revenge, perfect example. He's a player that we want to see do well, but when he doesn't do well, we say he's not playing well. Like I feel like LS should be able to put his bias aside and recognize that Crowny just didn't have a good tournament.
yeah, and saying he had a not a good tournament doesn't mean he was running it down and playing poorly. He was playing, decently for the most part, but he constantly was making mistakes in the clutch moments. And unfortunately for 80 carry specifically, that's not really a trait that you can have as a player and end up succeeding long term, specifically on the same team.
Yeah, like there was too many games this tournament. Not every game. There was just too many games where he was a little bit invisible. That's not a trait that you want your AD carry to have. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not surprised he's being replaced. I wouldn't have been surprised if they kept him either. But like the fact that they're not keeping him is not like, oh my god, how dare you?
Yeah, I mean
Just saying.
the other thing that you maybe also have to consider is maybe he wanted. I don't know if he's a free agent. Sorry, I don't know his contract status. I don't know if he's a free agent or if he's supposed to be under contract for next year. But maybe the team couldn't meet what he wanted or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, I hope he finds a team.
Yeah.
What
Next
else?
up, Mad Lions. We kind of already got the impression that that team was gonna go Explodo mode based off of the rumors that came out shortly after they got eliminated from Worlds, saying that they're releasing their whole roster. Same with the coaching staff, and seems like they're basically going full Spanish mode at this point with the Spanish head coach that they just got, and now they're rumored to be signing two players who previously played under that same coach, Supa and Alvaro, who's a bot lane, both AD
Yeah,
carry and support.
I've heard mixed things about this, so I'm not going to pretend like I've watched any of those players. Their skill level, I can't comment on that. I don't know. I don't really care. Once the LEC starts, I might watch, but at this point, it's whatever to me. Um, what I do think is actually a really good thing for the overall health of the league is teams being like the team to represent Spain, for example, or something like that. Like, I think that's just really healthy for the league if you have a French team, a Spanish team. Like, doesn't that just create more fandom? Could you imagine? I've been waiting forever for the LCS to make a Canada themed team. The closest thing that we ever got was CLG. They came out with like Team Canada jerseys, like how long ago? Like forever ago. I think Hotshot was still on the team. I don't remember. It was a long fucking time ago. Um, I think the biggest missed opportunity was when you had JoJo and Vulcan on the same squad. Like I think that there should just brand a Canadian jersey. You'll sell them. I just wish that was something we could have over here, but really we only have two countries that really participate in the league outside of imports, so, right? There's never going to be a full this team minus the failure of, TLCK for example.
Yeah, and I mean, Mad Lions is a Spanish org, so it's not really surprising to see them lean into that a little bit. And I definitely, while people can disagree with the decision to release the whole roster, specifically Mac and the coaching staff, at least they seem to have a very clear plan in place, and that's at least a very good sign for them moving forward. If maybe the performance of the team isn't going to be as high as it has been in previous years because they're not going to be having the great players who were performing so well on the team, like a El Yoya, like a Humanoid, like a Niski, like a Karzi, Hila Senkaiser, whatever it is. There's at least a direction with this team, and I think you could have easily seen this team maybe fall into some of the tropes that we see in the LCS of just getting a bunch of random players and old veterans that you throw together to make some team that you think and hope will be competitive but has no future. At least with Mad Lions in this case, they have some form of a future.
Yeah, I guess I'm just jealous as a fan because we can't really do that over here because half of our league is fucking imports. Like, I think it'd be sick if we had, a bunch of different teams repping different regions. No, I totally understand the you shouldn't be just making your team just depending on where they're from. I totally get that. But yeah, I think it's healthy for the fandom of the league, in short.
And then last up, when it comes to the EU stuff, is Ibai, the founder of Koi. is parting ways with Infinite Reality, who were the current owners of Rogue. And obviously, there was that partnership between Koi and Rogue, which became Koi and the LEC at the beginning of 2023. But that might not be the case anymore moving into 2024. I feel like Koi slash Rogue is probably getting another rebrand.
Yeah, sounds like that didn't last long.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to say on that. It's just like, oh shit, didn't work out. Interesting though.
Yeah. I mean, the gist of it is it sounds like Infinite Reality, which is formerly Rogue, is kind of going broke. That's the that's the deal.
Wasn't there something about players having a hard time getting paid or something? Or
Yeah,
like the team was like, we couldn't.
that was Koi at the time. That's
Yeah,
what
okay.
that
This
was
is
the
this is
thing.
coming
Like two
back to
weeks
me.
ago, when he publicly said he had to like fork out $3 million to pay for like team operation stuff, or three
Oh
million euros,
Jesus.
whatever it was.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. This is coming back to me now. That makes way more sense as to why the partnership isn't just working out exactly. We got a little bit more quick news left. Just the G2
Yeah,
stuff.
non free agency related, but a couple other
Hmm.
things. G2, although they were eliminated from Worlds the previous week, they made a name for themselves in the Twitter and Reddit verse after they released their scrim results on Twitter, which is something that they've been doing for all of 2023. So, in
Hmm.
all honesty, I was very surprised to see the backlash against G2, and it just felt like to me that it was just dogpiling, like unnecessarily dogpiling.
Me too. I don't want to go like I could probably have a 10-20 minute discussion about this, but just because this story has kind of been beat to death, I'll just say a couple quick things. I completely agree with you that like I don't think this should have been a big story. And I the only person I heard say this, now maybe other people said it, but the only person I heard say it was actually Cadril in a tweet that was like, we should be happy for transparency. Like, I
I
guess
agree.
my first thought is if all the North American teams did this, I would love that. Like, wouldn't that be great if we got all of the not just the North American team, never mind that, just all of the teams, just to, like that would be more things. The fans, I say this all the time, are always kept in the dark on so many things. It would be nice to know some stuff, and I think G2 should get credit for putting out information like that.
That's the
I
thing that
couldn't
was
up
confusing to me is they were getting credit when they did this during the LEC seasons and splits, but now all of a sudden it became like a flame, like a thing to flame them for, which made no sense to me.
what I think is different though, and stop me, feel free to stop me if I'm wrong here. What I think is different is they were showing how many people canceled scrims on them, right? They weren't showing their actual scrim results until now, right?
No,
This
they
is where they
showed.
released all the my understanding was this is when they released all the scrim results over the course of the year was now. But before they were just showing like, oh, we had this many scrims with this person and they canceled on us this many times or something like that. That's not how it
I
was.
think they also. I don't know if they did it for every single one, but I think they also at other points did release like the records against teams that they were scrimming.
Comment section, call us out if we're
I mean,
wrong here,
yeah,
but
I'm pretty sure they. I'm not 100% sure. I think initially you are correct in saying the purpose was to sort of shed a light on the canceling that happens in scrims and like the how that's like a bad part of scrim culture and whatnot. But yeah, just really don't understand the argument whatsoever. How it can be a detriment to the teams that are still remaining. Because that was the argument that I was just seeing all over the place. Was like
from like
it's
Steve.
well, just from various people. From there's everything that I was reading, not from any specific person. Was just that like you're doing a disservice to the teams who are still there competing. It's like how so? Like what?
I
Like
saw Steve was made a reply that like he doesn't think they should do it until afterwards. If I had to like steelman his argument, and this is a stretch, mind you, but I'm just gonna try to represent the best argument that I could think of for it, is that like let's say we'll just use the North American teams as an example. Let's say Cloud9 is scrimming against NRG and Cloud9 learns from NRG to play a bunch of Jace, for example. And then I don't know, FlyQuest learns from Cloud9. Cloud9 starts playing the Jace because they saw it against NRG. Then FlyQuest sees C9 playing Jace, like, oh, maybe there's a world where C9 may have picked this up from all of their scrims with NRG. Like, that is a very loose connection.
yeah,
And
but
there's a lot of
there's no champion picks or any of that kind of information that got revealed.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But if you've played those teams, you could like now if I'm FlyQuest and I'm scrimming C9 and I see them playing a bunch of Jace, but I know C9 played NRG a bunch, I could maybe say, oh, maybe C9 got this pick from NRG. I saw them scrim against NRG 7 times. Maybe like, do you get what I'm saying? I still don't think that is a good argument, just to be clear. I'm just trying to
I understand the argument. It still doesn't make
yeah,
sense, but I understand the argument. Don't get me wrong.
I don't yeah, I don't think teams should be all that upset because you're right, they didn't release like this is the champions we played and anything like that. They didn't. I'm just trying to find the best argument as to why you could be upset with that. Other than that, I don't really know. I the other thing that I'll say is like if there is a good reason and we just don't know what it is, I don't like the argument that oh TL you guys suck anyways, so you shouldn't like TL sucking shouldn't have anything to do with it. It's either a good argument or it's not an argument, regardless of what team is making the argument. I do think it's a weak argument though to say that um, you shouldn't release these scrims or whatever. I don't know what the good argument would be, but I saw a bunch of people discounting it just because TL was bad this world. It's like that it shouldn't have anything to do whether TL was good or bad at this worlds. There either should or should not be a good reason to share scrim results. I didn't see any good reason that like they should have to wait personally.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say on it. To me, it wasn't that big of a deal, and I think more teams should release their scrim results. I think is great, honestly.
Yeah, it just seemed like unnecessary dogpiling just because of the statements that were being made by players and whatnot and post game interviews and stuff. And for what it's worth, G2 announced that they're running back the same roster going
Yeah.
into 2024.
I did see the argument that G2 was trying to hide that they were so bad by showing, look how good we were in scrims. I don't know about any of that. I think it was just we've been releasing scrim stuff the whole year long. Now that the year is done, here's all of our scrim stuff. You know, that's I didn't look at it as, oh, let's try to distract from getting clapped by NRG by showing how good we were in scrims. I think it was just we've been transparent with scrim stuff all year. Let's just show everybody the rest now. You know,
Yeah,
that's the way I looked at
I
it.
think if anything, you could make the argument that they were trying to make themselves look better than they were if, and let me say if, they already had like the problem is they'd already been releasing all their scrim data right after the split ended. Like anytime one of the LEC splits was ending, that's when they released that info. Their world's run ended, then they released that info. In a world where let's say they just never released all that information right as the splits were ending and just did it X number of weeks down the line, and then for
Mhm.
this specific instance they decided to release them right when they got eliminated, I could see that being an argument, but they just have been doing exactly what they've been doing the whole year. And now we're just going to start getting mad at them for it. Like, come on with that.
Yep. I hope more teams follow suit. Okay. And then last thing.
Last up, not necessarily League of Legends related, but there was announcements that there was a bunch of layoffs at both Evil Geniuses and 100 Thieves. And for the most part, from what I was reading, it sounded like not a lot of the layoffs affected their various League of Legends. What's the word I'm looking for? Staffs or
Operations.
pillars? Yeah, operations, sure. But more esports winter stuff and why people, if you're sort of discounting the whole esports winter problem and not necessarily paying attention to the conversation, this is one of the reasons why you should.
It's relevant still. It's relevant because it kind of gives you an idea of which teams would be looking to spend, right? If they're already laying off staff, there's a much lower chance that they're willing to spend for that free agent player, right? So it's kind of what we would maybe expect out of EG. 100 Thieves, I don't know. This is where I'm a little bit like if they're laying off staff, maybe they don't want to pay for double lifts again. I don't know how much they were paying double lift in the first place. Goes back to my argument about how fans are always left in the dark with stuff. We don't know contract stuff, so yeah, I don't know. I should say salary. I gotta stop saying contracts.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna make a joke, but I didn't. I thought of it.
I do this every fucking time we talk about LCS contracts, and then I say I shouldn't say contracts. I should say salaries. Yeah. Okay, that's it for this episode. Right?
Yep.
Nothing else.
Nothing else.
Uh, Another reminder to subscribe, do all the stuff you normally do. And for those that are new, if you maybe just stumbled upon on YouTube, we're available on a bunch of platforms. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just look for the Clown Fiesta podcast. You'll find us. And we go live every Sunday night at 7 o'clock East, 4 o'clock West at twitch.tv/Clown Fiesta podcast. World's semis approaching and probably more free agency stuff next week. Hopefully, tune in for that. We'll see you guys next week. This has been episode 144 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.